There you go. You're live on both.
We're live on both. Facebook Live, Instagram Live, Ella Live.
I'm going to double check that we look okay.
I'm going to do a double check over here. So, episode 94.
Of quarantine. No, we're not quarantined.
No, we're
I
not
shouldn't
quarantined. No, not joking. And just cooking. Today is sort of matzo balls are one of those make or break dishes.
It's like when you think Jewish food, the only thing I've been able to think of is mazo ball soup. It's like the thing.
For a lot of people, I think matzo ball soup and bagels are like the entry points that most
So
people
true.
have with Jewish cuisine in their lives. And then maybe through doing these demos, we're able to broaden some people's horizons and understanding of what Jewish food is. It's all for us now. This project, this series, is around Passover food, Seder food.
Seder food.
Willa and I had planned to do a Seder on April the 8th, which we're still going to do.
Yeah.
But now it's just going to be the immediate family. Willa, her sister Andrea, their folks.
Yeah.
5 of us. And in the days leading up to it, instead of being all bummed because now we're not going to see everybody for Seder, Willa and I decided to turn on the Facebook and Instagram live feeds and start making food.
Exactly. I love it.
And today is matzo balls. So we actually started the matzo balls days ago when we first made matzah.
It's true. The first thing you need for matzo balls is matzah.
And matzah is the essential sort of symbol of Passover. So matzah is an unleavened cracker bread that we made in our oven directly on our oven stone.
Yes, we probably should have not ground one of them so we could at least ship people. But, oops. We're going to make more. Maybe we'll have more tomorrow.
We are going to have to make more because we've decided that we're going to sell these, some of them, a limited number of Passover dinners in conjunction with Rhino Coffee here in Tofino, British Columbia. We're only going to make a maximum of 18 meals, and that likely includes the 5 of us as well. We have a leg of Salt Spring Island lamb that we're going to cook on our charcoal rotisserie barbecue. Cousin Dean likes to call it the Australian barbecue.
Floating. Good sign, right?
Well, we'll see. So Will and I yesterday made the classic matzah meal, matzah ball. Oh, actually, that does not too bad. I would say leave it in for another 2 minutes.
Okay. Keep talking.
Yeah. Phew.
It's exposition.
So we dug up my matzo ball recipe when I first started Kaplanski's Deli. I just made smoked meat sandwiches, and then people asked me every day for matzo ball soup. When was I going to do matzo ball soup? So I went to the local supermarket.
Yeah.
And I went to the kosher.
I know the story. That's why I'm smiling right now.
Yeah, I love to tell the story.
It's a great story.
And I bought a box of Manischewitz matzah meal. And I had it in my hand cart, and maybe 4 or 6 boxes.
So Manischewitz makes not only terrible Passover wine, but matzah meal.
But they are, I mean, did you use the word terrible?
Well, it's
very sweet.
It's very sweet.
And it's not, the good thing about it, I think, is that it's not the kind of thing that anybody would really,
no one's going to go hard on the Manischewitz. maybe,
the Manischewitz.
I don't know.
Actually, we made a drink called a Jumosa in the restaurant. Elaine Gold and I created this a Jewish sangria, essentially. And she called it a Jumosa with spritzer and vermouth, and it had to be her fancy vermouth, Elaine's fancy vermouth. I can't remember what kind it was. Lillet vermouth. Thank you, Elaine Gold, our superstar floor manager for years and years and years that people still to this day have to love. And there's all kinds of things you can do with Passover ingredients. I love this time of year in the restaurant. We used to welcome the world. We did that for almost 10 years. And we'd have 2 public seders in my restaurant in Toronto. This was going to be our first Seder on the West Coast, and it's a real pleasure to be able to bring some of these recipes to you. Anyway, so I was in the supermarket. I was buying some matzah meal I had it on my hand card around and I run into Yitz Pensioner and his wife Bernice shopping with some of their grandkids. And it was a total moment because Yitz Pensioner was the godfather of delis in Toronto. He was the manager of Yitz's for many years. And he had sold his eponymous restaurant, Yitz's Deli, years before this. And so he was fully in retirement. And I invited Yitz to my restaurant to Kaplansky's upstairs, known as the Monarch Tavern. And I guess, he was just very kind to me. And Yitz would come into the restaurant, and he would insist on having his lunch and paying for it. And then he would come back a week later, and he'd let me buy him lunch. And he would tell me everything that he saw that could be fixed or needed help or should be, something that he saw.
Yitz became a mentor.
Yitz was a mentor, and it started that first day in the grocery store when he saw me with these boxes of Manischewitz matzo meal on my arm, and he said, "Here, let me give you my matzo ball recipe." It was given to him by a Borscht Belt chef, and the Borscht Belt is a series of summer camps and family-friendly. If you ever saw the Dirty Dancing, see Dirty Dancing?
Yeah, who hasn't seen
So that scene, that camp, is a Borscht Belt example of the kind of places where Henny Youngman and Milton Berle and many of the very famous comedians would ply their trade.
I had no idea that was a Jewish camp.
Nice.
So
this is what I'm saying. So these were, and this was the Borscht Belt. And so a Borscht Belt chef would be somebody who knows how to make these dishes in large scale preparation in the traditional ways, because there's the old joke. One Yenta said to the other Yenta about the food in the Borscht Belt at the kitchen. The food is terrible, but at least there's plenty of it.
Very nice.
Classic, right? So, matzo ball soup is one of those dishes that when you order it in a Jewish restaurant, you will be judged immediately by your authenticity, by how good it is, and so on. And the problem with that level of judgment, Willa, is that if in your family the tradition was to make a very heavy matzo ball, a sinker, that's the way you're supposed to make matzo balls.
Okay.
If in your family it's supposed to be light and fluffy, a floater, then that's the right way to make a matzo ball.
Those feel like
sinkers and floaters.
They're like,
because of course you have different branches of different families.
Of course.
And different people have different levels of qualities of cooks. Some people make their own matzah, like champions that we did.
Chunky chunk.
Well, but this is going to affect.
It's going to change the consistency of the.
And so we were panicking just before we came on camera this morning because we made our own matzah, our own matzah meal, and now our own matzah balls. And look, the kishka worked out really nicely.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I had the fricassee last night.
You did.
And it was divine for Second Supper.
Second Supper. So a few people are asking what we're using for stock. So we have chicken stock on the go. We made this chicken stock and froze it. So it's from a chicken past. But we typically make our stocks with all our scraps from cooking. So there's
celery, carrots,
onions, just their ends.
Garlic.
We've put carrot greens in it. We've put.
Actually, some of our stocks look very funny and green because we have the heads of the leeks and the heads of the carrots, all those greens. Sometimes they're too bitter for us to put into salads and so on.
Yeah.
And what else are you going to do with it? Well, look, there's flavor there. Let's capture the flavor. Different of our stuff because we don't really uphold a regular recipe like everything else. That's why Unprepared is such a good name for my radio show, because that's pretty much the way I go through life. That we opened some bags of stock and we were
did.
able to
And we heat them up.
create.
So we have a stock on the go. It's this pot here. And what we've done is we've added more chicken to it.
So it's got a wonderful, rich, golden patina to it right now. I'm going to add a little bit of carrot and celery as well.
Yeah.
We've just trimmed.
So this, I don't know if anyone will be able to see it, but we've got a little. It's pretty full. So we've got our chicken in there. So we ended up with an extra chicken carcass with lots of meat on it. So we've thrown that in too, just to give it some more chickeny flavor. And that's just going to be on cooking for the rest of this.
How did the matzo ball do?
I haven't tasted it.
Okay, this is the moment of truth with the matzo ball.
Well, maybe we should make up. Should we? Yeah, we can taste it now. Sure, why not? How do we taste it? Okay, put it on. Is it not cooked?
No, it's pretty good actually. So it could probably stand another 10 minutes of cooking,
Okay.
but it's going to be really nice and soft. It tastes really good too.
Does it?
Uh-huh. It's really good. So we took Yitz's recipe,
Mm-hmm.
and we added a little bit of water to it because
You're going to be looking for consistency and texture, right? When you finish making up the matzo meal,
right.
rather than exact amounts. It's cooking, not baking.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we're going to add a little bit of celery. We're going to add a little bit of carrot as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really nice. There's a nice level of salt in there too, eh?
Right? So then in the water, all there is salt.
Would you like me to peel the carrots, or what
Sure.
do you think? Oh, we didn't show people that we washed our hands. We did wash our hands before we started all of this. Just a reminder to everyone to wash their hands. Okay. Do you want to get started on the matzo balls, or what do you think?
Yeah, I'll show the matzo balls.
Well, we should show how to put them together before we pull out the stuff
You're
we
right,
made.
you're right. And we'll pick a bowl, this bowl, to do that with.
Yeah.
So the recipe that Yitz pulled out of his pocket for me was super simple, and he introduced it to me as being idiot proof, which itself is
It's a statement. And I just want to give a shout out to Bernice. I know she probably doesn't have Facebook, but she is on Facebook on principle.
On principle, that's right.
But shout out to Bernice Pensner. She is just the sweetest lady, and I love her to bits. And she told me, after you had told that story, she leaned over and told me that she was shocked. She couldn't believe her eyes when Yitz pulled out the recipe and gave it to you, because typically people don't share recipes in the restaurant world.
In this business, your recipes are everything, and which is sort of true, and it's also sort of not true, because Yitz himself was such a huge personality and part of his business that once he stepped away from it, of course, it affected his business.
Yeah.
And
Do you want these ones down too?
I think that's probably enough. Those
Okay.
things. And even just giving me his recipes, I've learned that giving somebody your recipe doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to run off and copy you. It takes a whole lot more than just doing something once at home to be able to say that you're able to do it.
It's very true, and I mean, you get the appreciation of how much work goes into things sometimes when you see the recipe. You're just like, oh, I want to make whatever at home, and then you kind of find out that it's actually a lot more work.
But what an incredible gesture, in that moment, and as Bernie said to you, the idea of what restaurateur who's devoted his whole life to this craft of deli reaches into his pocket for a card, writes out his recipe, which is 2 parts of matzo meal
Yeah.
or flour,
Or flour.
and to 1 part of
a mixture of egg, water, and he
Oil.
called shortening. We're gonna use bacon fat. We are dangerously low on schmaltz. Is really what this all boils down to. We're using bacon fat in almost everything because
well, first of all, it tastes great.
it does, and it has a lovely saltiness to it, which schmaltz has a little bit more salt than you would find in.
Plus, you add a lot of salt. Do over time.
Yeah.
And the caramelization that you get from schmaltz, I mean, it really is a very unique flavor. And if we had enough of that, or we're able to buy it the way that we used to buy it in the restaurant. And I remember at first, in the early days, I used to go to St. Andrew's Poultry in Kensington Market,
Mm-hmm.
and they would keep aside their carcasses and backs, and buy the 20-pound bag for me.
Wow.
You know, in the restaurant, we would. It's hard to imagine, I think, for somebody who's never seen the volume to imagine what our matzo ball production looked like, what our potato latka production looked like.
And that's why a recipe that calls for parts is great, because it's very easily scalable. We're just going to use a cup as a part, but in the restaurant, I assume that you'd be doing pounds and pounds of things.
Yeah, I have all the recipe books from the restaurant, and the volumes that stuff gets listed in for 24 eggs for. I'm going to trip this down.
I'm going to put these in a bowl. Are we adding them now, or are we adding them later?
The chopped ones?
Yeah.
We can add them now.
Oh, okay.
That our chicken stock is incredibly rich. So one trick I got taught very early on by a friend of mine named Jesse Valens was the double strength chicken stock, where Jesse came to the deli very early on. He taught me a lot of my early recipes. Helped me with my French fries, helped me with my gravy, and part of the ingredient of a gravy, of course, is the stock that you use. So Jesse set up a chicken stock, classic, pieces of chicken, carrots, onions, celery, maybe some thyme, and simmered it with water. Drained off the water. Then threw away, of course, the simmered ingredients. Set up a second chicken stock, and used the stock from the first one. As we've
instead
sort
of
of
water.
done here, exactly. Yeah. And you get a really, really strong flavored broth out of it. So this would be the basis of something that we would use for that kind of gravy down the road. And if we wanted sort of kishka, the same way that we did it in the deli, we might just do it with the smoky gravy. We'll do another episode of the brisket babysitting club.
Yes, after this we'll do brisket baby.
Cool.
So let's make our.
Let's make the matzo balls.
Actually, do you want to use the clear one?
Sure. Clear one makes more sense because people can see it better.
Okay, so 2 parts matzah and salt and pepper. I'm gonna add that.
Yep.
And excellent. Okay, mix that all together and make a little well. So, we are going to say 1 egg, which last night we found our 1 egg to be about, looks to be close to 1/4 of a cup. Yeah.
It was a third last night.
It was a third last night.
Different eggs are going to be different sizes.
Yeah.
So that's why we're using a measuring cup.
Let's do everything separately. That way we can have it.
Oh, right. so we avoid the problem.
Dun, dun, dun.
So last night we used SodaStream water instead of just plain water. One of the tricks that I've always been taught with matzo balls is to use soda water instead of plain water.
Okay, so you want to add that? So a third of a cup of this, and we'll go for
How much?
about a third of a cup. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Oh! Good.
Yikes.
So a third of a cup of whatever fat you're using. And you want to grab the soda stream? We have some in the fridge. So I'm gonna do
another alternative.
Yeah.
Is we could use the shiitake mushroom water.
Oh, do you want to do that instead?
Use a little bit of it. I think just a little bit.
So go up to a third.
I
Yep.
think,
Or do you want? What do you want to do?
I think that's enough.
Okay.
You're almost too much.
Slight flavoring.
Slight flavoring.
Okay, so a quarter of a cup
Got a little.
is 2 ounces, and a third of a cup is
No, it's morale, actually. It's morale.
like 3 ounces. So we'll go for. So we're gonna add a little bit more than a third of a cup because our egg was short of soda stream water, and then we're just gonna mix everything together. And that's the. So why would you use carbonated like soda water?
Make them lighter.
So we're making floaters. Is that what you're saying?
We're going for the floater, that's right. The one that we first tasted, not so floatery.
But our matzo meal is also fairly chunky. Do you think that?
But
That's caused
our
it.
matzo meal is chunky. I also think that Yitz's Catskills chef came from a different humidity rated.
So this is what it's looking like right now.
terroir.
So it's sticking together. Do you want more water in there? It's still.
Well, so
it's
this is
still
going to
dry
sit
bits.
overnight.
Yes.
And so this is the reason that we're giving this demo now is because we did this last night, and then when we took the batter out this morning,
That's right.
we added a little bit of extra, probably a quarter cup
We added about a quarter cup more water. Yeah.
more water to this mixture. And part of it, I think, is that our grinding techniques of our matzo meal was probably not to the stone ground professional level when we did it.
True enough.
We improved over time, and now we're getting to the bottom of our barrel.
That's true too.
So this is probably the coarser matzo meal. And coarser matzo meal likely means the absorption is being affected. So we're kind of having to wing it to some degree.
So, but it is. See how I'm moving around? It is sticking together.
You'll wash your hands again.
It's not tacky, but it's just kind of slightly clumping. There's no bit of my matzo now that is dry. Everything is a little bit wet. And we're just going to cover it and stick it in the fridge overnight.
Yeah, it's cover and refrigerate overnight. This was always the most uncomfortable part for guys working on the prep team in the deli because running out of matzo balls was always a really big deal, and there's no way that you can make them really, really fast for somebody. It's a process that takes at least overnight to let them get set up. And like I said, it's an iconic dish. It's the kind of thing that when people come into your home or into your restaurant or wherever you're serving them.
Okay, so I'm going to take this one, put this one in and take this one out. Thank you. So this is the one that we made last night.
I love it. Here's the one we made earlier. That's
Yeah,
right.
I know. I feel like a professional cooking show now.
That's everybody's favorite phrase, isn't
Oh, someone's asking if we could add Prosecco instead of soda.
Prosecco.
I love it.
You know, it's such a personal thing. People's preferences for flavors and textures when it comes to all of this stuff. Again, you know, if in your family tradition it was made a certain way, and this is different than your family's way, and this is wrong. You know, what's you're saying? Don't yuck somebody's yum.
Don't yuck someone's yum. Yeah.
You know, the idea that this is the way one family makes it, or tried to make it, or was the tradition in their family as opposed to yours, is it's all good. There's no right way, and you know, I think the idea of introducing these recipes, these concepts, doing it together with my wife Willa, is a huge amount of pleasure for me, and to show you what a matzo ball looks like. So we made matzah, we pulverized it in a food processor.
Yeah.
We left it overnight in this.
So we made up the mixture that we just made up and left it overnight to set, and it kind of came out a little bit too dry. So we added a little bit more water and let it sit again. As you can see, it feels like everything's expanded.
Yeah, that's you can see the grains of matzah meal that are still sort of getting activated, and I would say we had this one cooking for about 15 minutes.
Probably.
Earlier, once we got the show started, I would leave them for another, based on what we tasted, another 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay.
And then we could either continue to cook them with the soup or just eat them with the soup at that point, because the soup is going to be pretty much ready to go itself.
Now, how big because I've seen some matzo balls that are like
massive, as big as your head, kind of.
Yeah.
So I'd say I'd describe it as golf ball size.
Okay.
It's kind of what we're looking for here.
In wet hands,
It
you
will,
said, right?
Wet hands and work quickly are the 2 lessons of matzo ball production that I've always been taught. As this comes to room temperature, it will become more sticky and more difficult to deal with. And so being able to get as many of these into the pot at the same time is also important for cook times.
Should we put them on a tray and work that way?
Let's do it. So you're looking for roughly golf ball size. Matzo ball size golf balls. And as we showed you a moment ago, we have 1 water bath and 1 chicken bath going. I washed my hands just a moment ago, so I'm not going to do it again. And
I feel like we made our meatballs slightly smaller, right?
Oh, the meatballs earlier, yes.
Yes.
Well, we tried to.
We tried to. There might have been a third cook in the kitchen who was opting to make things big and fast. I'm not going to say who it was.
No.
Mom. But
I think these will work out nicely, and you can count on your matzo balls expanding to about double their size.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and once you've boiled your matzo ball, it does freeze.
You're making.
I'm just going slightly smaller.
You're going smaller.
I am. I should go slightly larger.
Yes.
Okay.
Consistency.
You're right. I got busted for small balls, but now I've got bigger balls. Okay. We're gonna power through it.
Yeah. So it looks like 2, 4, 6, 8. We'll get like 16 matzo balls out of this probably.
16 matzo balls out of a batch. That was 2 cups of matzah. Okay, cool.
I think because
Willa's gonna go back over this after this, and she's gonna post the recipe for people. And
I'm gonna post it in parts, like.
So remember, we had the first mix, the matzah meal with the wet and the dry parts to make the matzah balls, and leave those overnight in our fridge. And then we pulled them out. We've shown you how to do that today.
Yeah.
But it is a 2-day process.
It is. But you can make your chicken stock up today, and then heat it up tomorrow and serve your matzo balls alongside.
So we're big proponents of the roasted chicken at home club idea, And one of the big benefits of roasting a chicken at home is that you get the pan that you roasted the chicken in, and a lot of those small chicken parts that don't get eaten.
Yeah.
And bones that you can carve up and boil up in a stock. And make and then freeze tons and tons of your own stocks for chicken, for beef, for fish, and then use them at a later date for a soup or a stew or a sauce. We showed you that Will and I sometimes like to freeze our stocks in ice cube trays, and that way we can add them in smaller quantities to things. These ones that we've thawed for this chicken soup were done in larger formats.
Now yours are a lot smoother than mine. Should mine be nice and smooth? Is there like a... I'm just noticing that mine are kind of like moon craters and yours are like nice little ping pong balls.
I think, Willa, that each of us has our own way with these things. And I've probably done a lot more matzo balls in my time than you have in your time.
It's true.
But now it's our time, and that's really cool. I think this is... So now we're able to show people that we had one tester earlier as well. So there were 17 or 18.
This is, I think, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So we made 15 out of
15 balls, matzo balls out of the batch.
Okay, and we're adding them all together?
We're going to add... I would say we can add them all together.
Okay.
They should all fit.
So I'm going to use a spoon.
Yep.
So they sink when they go in, and they float when they're done?
Well, they float when they're cooked, but I based on the one that we tasted, I would cook them for another 5 or 10 minutes beyond that. So I would say that by noon our time here in Tofino, BC, and this is our actual kitchen in our apartment, they will be... this batch will likely take a little bit longer because of the volume. But I wouldn't crowd them any more than that. Maybe you could add one.
Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna go.
Perfect.
I'll bring the camera over so that people can kind of see.
Ooh.
Or try to.
Do it.
If people don't mind.
That's excellent.
Moving stuff around. I'll try to be fast.
Excellent.
And what else are we adding to the? So I'm gonna bring one camera over, and then I'm gonna bring another camera over. Is what's gonna happen.
Go first.
Facebook Live, it's going first. Oops, sorry guys. I know, it's terrible. There we go. So here we go.
Whoa.
So we're walking over. These are our pots.
Hello.
So
Hello from the pots.
that's what our matzo balls are looking like. They are sinking at the moment.
Bottom of the pot.
Bottom of the pot. Okay. And do you want to show the chicken stock while we're at it?
Sure I do.
And there's, oh, that looks beautiful.
Maybe
Yummy.
a little bit on the boily side. We can turn this puppy down.
Definitely. Okay. So, Facebook Live is going back.
See you, Facebook Live. Thanks for coming over. Hello, Instagram Live.
Okay, wait a second.
Welcome to the show.
Let's get you back up and level. There you go.
So much fun. This is going to taste so good. I'm actually...
Okay, and Instagram. Oh, hi, Cindy.
Cindy!
Here we go. Cindy's tasting our soup.
Oh, it's so
That's
good.
our stock.
Oh,
dinner.
it's so good.
Is it? That's
It's
great.
so good. That's the chicken soup.
Yeah,
And we're making matzo balls over here. So those are the matzo balls that we just rolled out. We set the batter mixture yesterday. We set it overnight. We had to use a little bit of extra water this morning when we put them together, but they rolled up nicely. We did one tester before we presented them to you here, and I think we actually tested at the top of the video. So if you want to
we did. Yeah, at the very start of the video, we tested it.
I think it probably needed about another 5 or so minutes of cooking. So it's gone in now at 20 minutes to noon, Tofino time.
Yeah. I'm going to grab the rest of my coffee, sorry. Did we want to add our...
Yes. So we had, in a previous episode, gotten some macro kelp and morel mushrooms
Mm.
from Paul Moran himself. Paul
Well, I was going to taste the stock. You see that? I'm going to taste the stock.
Paul is the chef at 1909, which is a wonderful restaurant at Tofino Resort Marina, just down 5 minutes walk from where we are right now. I'm going to put this right in there, Willa.
Okay. Oh, that is. It's really good. So we typically salt our stocks as well. So when we're making our stocks, we get them to a place where we're happy with them. That is delicious.
Isn't that great?
It's nice and it has a little bit of fat in it. The chicken flavor is really strong. The carrot's coming through. It's not too oniony because sometimes our stocks can go heavy on the onion.
Bay leaf as well. Bay leaf is very easy to add an extra bay leaf, and then it becomes a very overpowering flavor. How's the bay leaf on this one?
It's you know what? It's barely noticeable. But I think.
I wonder what the.
So I think the chicken that we added, the carcass that we added, is adding a nice, like, little bit of fat to the stock because our stock was pretty lean. And I'm
we've
sure
been trying to squeeze every last ounce of fat out of every chicken so that we can use it as schmaltz. So that's making it into the
the
soup.
great schmaltz show.
I know.
2009.
You see how
2020.
we scrape everything down that's ever had chicken touch it so we
so
can have
true.
every last piece of
Every
schmaltz.
little bit counts. So, how would we serve this?
So the chicken soup with matzo balls is a bowl of soup.
Okay, so they've just started to float now. We have like one or two floating.
Yeah, I'd say we're probably still another 10 minutes away.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no. I like because we cooked them for another 10 minutes at least. So I would say 15 minutes with our matzah.
My at least 2 balls
Okay.
in a bowl.
Two
So
balls
that
to a bowl.
So that typically we would have a large size and a small size. But I always
Okay.
think that a nice.
No one wants just one matzo ball unless it's again the size of your head.
Well, and the problem with that too is that there are people who have different sizes of appetites,
Mm-hmm.
and some people come in and they just want one, or they want the smaller size, and you get asked for it a lot in the restaurant business, and being able to give somebody a soup and sandwich combo, if they're a senior, they might even want a half sandwich.
Yeah.
You know.
That's what my parents would typically go for. Soup and half a sandwich, and then I would.
So in that case, 2 matzo balls, 2 slightly smaller balls, makes it easier to give people what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And we would always make sure that there was some carrot and celery in the bowl as well.
And a little bit of dill on the top.
Dill as a garnish, 1,000% always, and making sure that we had
Should we have added dill to the stock?
dill
To the soup,
should be in there now. If we
We don't have any dill right at the moment. I don't even know if the co-op has.
You know, this is cooking what we have and how we have, and we added bull kelp, which will be the replacement for dill, and not bull kelp, but macro kelp, I should say.
So we got a little question about how tightly we rolled the balls. We packed them and then we rolled them.
We didn't especially. No, we weren't making snowballs. We weren't preparing. We weren't arming ourselves for a fight. Just sort of roll them golf ball size and try to get some uniformity on it.
The mixture wants to stick together. It's kind of at the moisture level where it's tacky.
Half of them are floating now, and they're all sort of popping up one after the other.
Very cute.
It's kind of exciting, actually.
My apologies for our camera setup that we can't show you the exciting times of matzo balls popping.
All floating. We're all floating now, baby. We're all floaters.
Now, would sinkers float and then sink? Like, how does that work?
So what Will is
Or
referring
is
to
it
is,
like
if you're
a-
just tuning in, is that there are different classifications of matzo balls. When I did my first matzo ball challenge, where we invited people to bring their matzo balls in from home,
Amazing.
and we had Bonnie Stern,
Mm-hmm.
Moses Znaimer, and a host of other interesting professors. David Sachs
Amazing.
was one of our guest judges,
Yeah.
and they 2 categories: sinkers and floaters.
Really?
You have to.
That's amazing.
So in the Jewish tradition, you either made it like it was a golf ball that sunk to the bottom of your bowl of soup, which was a sinker.
Would that be like a packing technique? Would that be like making it
I think it's the
small?
ratio. So this is the ratio that Yitz's recipe called for: 2 parts matzah meal to 1 part liquids. That is water, egg, and fat.
Mm-hmm.
If you change that
You get
slightly, I think it'll get more or less loose. And
So someone's asking for a description of the taste of a mazo ball. I would describe the taste a lot like dumplings that you would get in stew dumplings. Kind of floury, light, a little bit salty. It's a vehicle for absorbing the soup and so they don't have like a really strong taste, but it's a salty, toasted flour taste.
I salted the water that the matzah balls are being boiled in, but I didn't. I mean, pinch of maybe 2 pinches of salt before we got started with that,
Mm-hmm.
and we did, as you saw, add salt and pepper to the matzah meal, but
Not a lot.
And ours, we were audacious enough to use bacon fat as our shortening for the matzah balls, which means, of course, that they are not kosher, which is just fine by us because we're not kosher people.
We're not.
But they will have some saltiness
Yes.
in the fat there, and then we just added some macro kelp, and there'll be some saltiness there too. So we want to make sure that we're not over salting at the same time. But I really like the flavor of our matzah ball.
I think it's fantastic.
Good. The texture was a little bit on the side, like I was not quite. Could have used more cooking, but that was, we set this up for ourselves, and that's the way we roll.
Now, one other question that I would have would be, how do we store it? Once we've made our
Beautiful question.
ingredients-
So matzah balls, as I said a little bit earlier, you can cook, cool, and freeze.
Okay.
And I would freeze them typically in pairs, either in Ziploc baggies,
Okay.
or if you have room in your freezer, on a whole tray, and you could put them flat on a tray and then cover them in plastic as a tray or tin foil.
Yeah, we don't have that much room in our freezer.
We don't in our freezer here because this is the only freezer that we have. But the folks down the hall have a stand-up freezer, and they don't even think they have that kind of room. So in that case, if you have to freeze them 1 by 1, I would try and freeze them 2 by 2 in small Ziploc baggies and put them strategically in places in your freezer, and they will last for weeks and months. We never really had to face weeks and months of having them sit around in the restaurant because they moved, and we made a lot of matzo balls all the time.
Now, I remember you selling jars of mazo ball soup, and they had mazo balls already in them. Is that an appropriate way of storing them?
So absolutely great. Look at you with a great question.
I just remember because when we were first dating, I got really sick, and you came over with borscht and mazo ball soup.
I did that?
You did that. You left them on my doorstep because I was really sick.
Wow.
And it was super sweet.
Wow.
So,
Although
you don't remember that, Belgy.
Well, I remember dropping off a donut. Maybe the first or second day that you and I met, and I was a judge on a donut show, and so we had lots of donuts around, and on the drive home, you and I lived very close
We
together, a couple blocks apart, and I dropped a donut, and you got all freaked out about me, like it was
It was like the sweetest gesture, and it freaked me out completely. I just didn't know, like, I just met this dude, and he's
And
bringing
I left
me-
you soup after that?
We had been dating a little while.
Oh, okay.
And he left me soup.
Yeah, I loved getting that phone call from that, hello, do you have any chicken soup with matzo balls? I mean, a sick person when they're calling you for your soups, moms and dads for their kids as well. Being in that business, being able to show people what chicken soup and matzo balls is an iconic dish, and I alluded to it in a previous bit. With you break your arm, you broke your heart, or you're sick in bed, matzo ball soup is what you want. It's what Jewish penicillin, and this is the classic go-to dish.
For sure.
But it really, you know, when you get it right, it is a comfort food for so many of us, and it really takes us to another place and brings us back to people who made this dish for us when we were not feeling well, or when we were little, or when something happened to us. And I think food like this can bring us back to those times, those places.
Oh,
and
for
those people.
sure. It's love.
It is love.
And oftentimes when you're cooking for someone who's sick, it's because you love them and you want to take care of them.
These matzo balls are looking really nice, Willa.
Oh, great.
And they're floating nicely along. I would say that we want to let them grow another.
So they have grown a little bit. I would say.
Take one out, show people.
Sure. Here. This was the bowl that we had it in before. So we made them golf ball sized, and now they are.
Those were 7 minutes ago. We put them in the water.
What's that?
So I think we should leave them another 10 minutes.
I think so too. They are a little bit bigger than they were before, but if you say they need to get bigger, then
They should approximately double in size.
So from a golf ball to like a baseball?
Yeah. Almost a baseball.
Almost a baseball? Okay. So we'll let those. Then yeah, we definitely have just enough room for them to double in size in our pot. And I think that's so. Tomorrow, we hadn't planned on doing anything, but because our kugel demonstration got postponed, we're gonna do the kugel tomorrow.
Kugel
At 2:00 Pacific time, which is 5:00 in Ontario.
6:30 in Newfoundland.
6:30 in Newfoundland. So unfortunately, I know we're probably going to be breaking in on lots of people's dinner hours. But kugel is fantastic.
Oh, kugel. And Will and I were flipping through a wedding gift from her friend's mom, from Ayala's mom.
Ayala's mom, from Marlene.
Arlene?
Marlene.
Sorry, Marlene. And there are pages and pages of kugels. And kugel is essentially a casserole. Can be sweet or savory. Potato kugel is one of my absolute favorites. We made a recipe of Noreen Gillitz's for many years, and we're going to bring a new kugel recipe tomorrow.
Yeah, so get your potatoes ready. You'll need almost like 4 or 5 pounds of potatoes.
Well, depending on how much kugel you want to make.
Sure enough.
And,
we're going to make like a...
Dutch ovens are perfect for making kugels in, so if you have a enamelware, porcelain, Dutch oven style.
Yeah, but you could
like
also,
that,
if you don't want to make it as a casserole, if you want to individually give them out, we're gonna do, maybe we'll do half of it in a muffin tin.
Muffin tins. We're gonna do muffin tin kugels with our potato kugels as well, and noodle pudding is another wonderful dish. Noodle kugel.
Noodle kugel is like sweet.
With raisins.
It's like a dessert.
Yeah, fabulous
dish that you have at dinner, which. It's like sweet potato casserole. Like it's one of those it's like, oh, it's a vegetable, so I'm allowed to eat it.
Yeah, it's fabulous, and my mother always made a lovely one. We're
doing
sorry
potato.
not to be able to be with the rest of the family for Passover this year, and to be doing our own thing out here. And I really wish we were able to send them some of our matzah in time for their seders, which. I don't think we're going to make our next batch of matzah until next week, right?
Well, we could make a small batch to send care packages to your family. Why not?
If we could get those in the mail on Monday, they could have them by Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
Sometime during Passover for sure. So we're going to try and make our next batch of matzahs on Monday, so we can send them to some of our family members.
Sunday. To send out Monday because the mail leaves at 11.
Right. And I'm going to have to do my radio show on Sunday as well. And the topic this week will be, I'm not sure of what we're going to do.
Completely unprepared.
Well, I had a guest, in Colombia, Cartagena, Colombia. Gentleman owns a restaurant there, and he's had second thoughts about coming on the show.
Oh, he's nervous.
I guess so, and I wasn't sure if I should like give him the hard sell, or he's somebody that my cousin Betsy met on her recent visit to his city, and he'd given her cooking lessons, and so she thought that he would make an amazing interview subject for my show. And the idea of connecting with a Colombian restaurant owner in Cartagena and hearing his story in all of this, I thought would be an interesting subject. But if he's not comfortable with it, then
so be it. That's too bad.
It is too bad.
If you're into Fino, you can always call in to the radio station. You could do a call-in show. Maybe.
Yeah,
I know people are very shy about calling into the radio station here.
I'm not sure if that's true. I think if we had the right provocative question that resonated with people.
Why don't we talk about comfort food?
I think comfort food is a great thing to talk about, and we'll
or
go
why
live.
don't you talk about comfort food?
Oh,
I said we when I really meant you.
Well, you're my co-pilot for sure, and show producer. You've been producing that show. We're going to do that on Facebook Live again this week. We're going to be 9 a.m. tomorrow, April the 7th. 5th. Days are so weird. I should look at the calendar before I... 5th, 9 a.m. TuffCityRadio.rocks is our radio show. Should we take a look and see how we're looking on the Mazo Balls?
Oh, they look good.
They're looking really good. You can see they're growing a little bit. I would still give them another 5 minutes.
I'll show you the size difference now.
They look really good.
So as you can see, they've gotten a bit bigger, but we kind of want it to fill the whole bowl, I guess.
Almost. We're not going like a full softball, but this is perfect. So you'll remember that Will and I made the matzah.
Yep.
We pulverized it into a meal.
Yep.
We grew the chickens from...
Oh, we did not.
We made a chicken soup. We boiled some matzo balls. We set them up yesterday, so it's a 2-day process to make your matzo balls. And we hope you like this show. We hope you like the demo.
Yeah. Okay.
Easy to make. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah. Say goodnight, Gracie.
Bye. Okay.